Happy Thursday, everybody. Happy third Thursday. And I don't know if you guys know, but in addition to it being Ice Storm Thursday and Mars rover landing on Mars Thursday, the third Thursday is also Agile Richmond Thursday. So welcome. It's great to see everybody, even if we can't be physically in the same space. And I'm really glad you took the time out of your busy week and busy evening to spend a little bit with us. I want to share a few things and then get to the reason we're all here is our good friend, Mike Vizdos. But before we do, a couple of things. Let me start with this. I want to do some quick intros. Hi, I'm Brad, president of this wonderful group of people and board that we call ourselves Agile Richmond, the folks who keep me accountable and the folks who work with me to make sure we deliver all this wonderful content to you guys. Welcome to everybody else. And welcome, Mike. It's great to see you. We aren't the only big game in town. In fact, we don't want to be the only game in town. In fact, we love everything else going on in our community. I want to make sure we take moments to highlight the other stuff going on and the other ways to connect and learn and do all the things we can't do when we're all physically in the same place. You can do it just through the normal work channels. So next week, Scrum RVA. Somebody who might be speaking here is also speaking at Scrum RVA. Hi, Mike. Mike's we doing a great talk about getting back to basics and some of the updates around the 2020 Scrum Guide. Then Monday, March 1st, I'm pretty excited about this one. Product Tank's actually going to have a conversation with David Bland. If you haven't seen any of David's work around lean startup and testing business ideas, his talk about testing business ideas is going to be fantastic. If you haven't read his book, I also highly recommend the book by the same name. Just great work that he's been doing and partnering up with Alec Osterwalder and the stuff that they've been doing around business value canvas and testing business ideas. Just fantastic stuff. Capital Kanban's back. Marie Dingus will be speaking March 3rd to the Capital Kanban crew. And Monday, March 15th, Agile 757. It's going to have Enrico Tiati. Megan, I know I'm going to pronounce that wrong. I'm talking about Knepin and how it can help with your Agile retrospectives. Anybody have anything else that I don't know about yet that they'd like to take a minute to let folks know about?
I'd just like to expand on Agile 757. This Monday, March 15th, or it's not this Monday, but it's March 15th, we're actually experimenting with a new time slot, and it's going to be a lunchtime meetup from 12 to 1, and we promise to be done by 1 so everybody can get back to work. So I, for one, am excited about the experiment, so hopefully it'll work for people.
That's fantastic. I love that idea.
Thanks.
No, thank you. Welcome. Glad to have you here. So, any other comments? Any other things coming up that we don't know about? And if there are things you'd like to have included, please let me know. President at Agile Richmond goes to actually the entire board, and if I don't catch it, one of us will. So, if there's something you'd like to have, an event or something we need to know about as a community, please let us know. We'd love to make sure it gets highlighted. We are here to make sure everyone has everything they can to help them be better and really excel in their jobs. So, hearing nothing else, as always, thank you to our sponsors. We couldn't be doing this without our sponsors. They've supported us through Innovate, through COVID, and now they continue to support us through the things that we do to make sure our monthly meetings continue to go. So, if you are interested in being a sponsor, please let us know. Would be happy and would love to have your name on this list. But I can't say thank you enough to all of our sponsors who make what we do possible as an organization and as a community. So normally, if we were all here together, we'd have some moment to say, hey, who's looking for work? Who's got? It's hard to do that in a Zoom meeting without creating a bunch of ad hoc breakout rooms. And we've been talking about this as a board. What if we just invited everybody to Slack? So here's an experiment we're going to try. If you would like to be part of Agile Richmond Slack, we have a public Slack channel that we're going to see how this works. Send an email, slack-request@agilerichmond.com. Send me an email. I will add you to the list. And we'll let you into our public Slack channel. Now, what is it for? It's for whatever we want it to be. Yes, of course. looking for work, looking for people. It's a great thing to have it in there, but also just stay connected. Also just have conversations. Also just keep our community going when it's hard for us to do that, when we've been stuck inside for months and months and months. I'm sorry we didn't do this sooner, but now that we have, let's make this awesome. So I'm watching the emails already to start to come in, and I love it. Thank you, everybody. So if you'd like to be in there, the only things that I would say is I'll go back to some of the basic principles of modern Agile. And one of them is making safety a prerequisite. This is a safe community. This is a safe space, and we need to be respectful to each other. And there's a nice little intro message on the channel about this as well. Be respectful of each other. Have this be a place where we welcome each other and work towards being a better community. And as I tell my kids, don't make me parent you. Don't do stuff where we have to come in and set any bigger goals than that. Be respectful and be human to each other, and this is going to work out great. And if not, we'll have to rethink the experiment and try to figure something out. We know that we have an awesome community here, and we really want to make sure everybody gets a chance to participate. So thank you.
Oh, come here.
Oh yeah, one more thing. What was that thing you were asking me about, Elizabeth?
Innovate RBA.
Hey, you guys remember this thing called Innovate Virginia? I sure do. Man, I miss it. You know what would be cool? What would be really cool is if we could have one of those. It's gonna be hard to do that when we can't get together unless we did it all virtual. So let's do that. 6 p.m. this evening, as of 19 minutes ago, call for speakers is now officially open for what we're calling Innovate Virginia, Spring 2021. Hey, guess what? It's free. No catches, no catches. It's free, really. We have been incredibly grateful to have a community that supported us through all of this. We have a huge conference that we try to do every year, and we've made a commitment to our community to say that if you have a ticket for Innovate 2020, you have a ticket for Innovate whenever we are back together as a group of people together again. And we keep looking at the calendar to say we would love to be able to do that this year. We can't in good conscience do that. I don't know about you, but the place where I work just said there's no chance we're getting back together face to face till September at the earliest. So what are we going to do between now and then? Well, Minidate. We're going to have a virtual conference, and if you've got a ticket, thank you. Thank you for holding on to your ticket. We'll do it. But right now, we're going to do Minivate in May, and it's going to be free. And we'd love to hear you talk. So go right now. Go to innovatevirginia.com. Read the new site there. Go to agilerichmond.com and click the big Minivate button right there in the middle of the page. Call for speakers open now and runs through the end of March. Conferences, again, I'll go back. Friday, May 21st, all day. We're going to do 2 channels. You can call them tracks, but we don't want to limit what people talk about. We're going to do 2 channels of online Zoom video. Tell us what you want to talk about. Bring it to the community. Of course, let's talk about the things we've learned. Let's talk about all the stuff that needs to go on. But we want to make sure we have an opportunity for us as a community to get together and learn together and bring back Innovate. So it's such an important part of our lives and our community. So we're super excited about it. We've been working really hard to make this happen. We can't wait to see you guys there. Tickets, if you want to sign up, there's a May event on Meetup. I don't think it'll let you actually sign up yet, but it will very, very shortly. Sign up for tickets, and we'll send out plenty of reminders for people to do this. All you have to do for a ticket is say you're going to attend the meetup. That's it. And we'll make sure that we have all the back-end spaces and videos and everything we need to make sure that we have enough space for everybody. So that's Minivate. And we'll pause real quickly. If anybody has any questions, feel free to ask me now. Anything?
What kind of speakers are you looking for, Braz?
Anyone, Mike. And that's the thing. Looking for experienced speakers. We're looking for people who have experience doing this and have something to say. We're looking for people who've never spoken before, and this is their first time speaking. Then one of the things that and Megan knows that I'm going to say this, one of the things that I love bringing up about our community is I'm sure there are a million different things that you've thought of that you can say to yourself, I'd love to talk about this, but you know what? Everybody else has already talked about it. You know what? Right now, I haven't heard it in your voice, and I haven't heard your story. And that's what's going to make it really interesting. So if you've heard something that says, here's what I've learned during this global pandemic that really reminded me of why I do Agile. Here are some tips and tricks I had with getting my team working a lot more effectively remotely. Here's something that I've learned that is different that my place does that nobody else has seen yet. I'd love to tell you that story. I'd love to hear it. We'd love to hear it. Your community would love to hear it. And let's use this as a chance for us to get together and learn from each other.
And here's my offer too, and I'm pretty sure others here will make the offer. If you're interested in creating a talk and you need some help or guidance, let me know. This is an awesome opportunity for you to try something in a pretty safe environment, and especially you kind of see, let's see, Megan, you've seen this too. Like by starting out in these regional groups, it helps with some of the bigger talks going forward if you want.
So I'm seeing Rosemary, great question. Give me half a second. Rosemary's asking, hey, where's that sign up link, Brad? And that's a really great question, Rosemary. If you give me 1 second, I'm going to switch, Mike, I'm going to turn off your lovely face. If that's okay.
It's all good.
Okay. And I'm going to share my other browser window. Make sure I get the right one that has the right version of Innovate in it. Drum roll, yes. So, hey everybody, here's the website. Where's my call for speakers? Well, if I click over here on the call for speakers bit.
Well, you got to go to Innovate Virginia, not
InnovateVirginia.com. Well, if you go to Agile Richmond, funny you should ask. Let me go in and if I hit call for speakers, we go right up here to our call for speakers. Yes, I'm me. No, I'm not trying to put in a talk just yet. But here's our call for speakers. It's powered by Sessionize, which is great. Thank you, folks at Sessionize, for enabling our license to actually use this. It's another thing we offer to the community. If I happen to go to Agile Richmond,
just click on the big thing that says Minnovate.
Yeah, there's a big thing in the middle that says Minnovate, and that'll take you to Innovate Virginia, where you can go down to call for speakers. Great question, Rosemary. Thank you for asking. I really appreciate it. So, we're really excited. We'll continue to let everybody know about it. Let me real quickly bring up this and talk about my good friend Mike Vizdos, which is the whole reason we're here. So, what can I tell you about Mike? Mike's a trainer. Mike's one of the best Scrum trainers I've ever met. And I don't say that just because he taught me the secret handshake back when there was still a secret handshake, Mike. Mike's who I took my first CSM course from back in 2000, a long, long time ago, when dinosaurs still roamed the earth, and Mike Vizdos had been doing Scrum just for probably a decade. So on top of that, Mike's also the Scrum Master in Residence at VCU at the Da Vinci Center. Also has been working closely with several other organizations in the higher education space doing Agile education. On top of that, Mike has been working on, what else have you been working on, Mike? I'm trying to think. You've been doing so much lately. Anything else I'm
releasing a lot of free resources out there, and we'll touch on some of those tonight. There's a ton of stuff that I've published lately that I want to get your hands on.
I'd love to see those too. The only other thing that when I think Mike Vizdos is implementing Scrum, and I know I've been using Chicken and Pigs and Mike's work that he did for a number of years, getting that out the door as part of how I help teams bring the humor and the levity and the joy of this Agile stuff back to the work that they do. So, Mike, at a personal level, thank you. Without you, I wouldn't be here right now. I wouldn't be doing what I do. And Mike, thank you for taking the time this evening to share with us, 11 tips for a successful Scrum implementation. With that, I will stop sharing and cede the floor to my good friend, Mike Vizdos.
Woohoo. This is kind of, I get to see a picture of my picture on here, which is always cool. Let's see, I'll move that over here. So should be sharing my screen now. Everybody can see the beautiful Google Doc. One of the things as I present, and especially within this virtual environment now, there's a lot of people that will present with the the real presentation screen. One of the things I actually like doing as a presenter is basically keeping this sidebar up so that, if I need to make changes real time, you can do that. Okay. It doesn't have to be perfect and slick and awesome looking. Remember, what you really want to make sure you can get across is the content. And what's really, really important, especially for the group that's here tonight, are the conversations that happen. So again, you can see none of my slides are going to be, these high-tech, super awesome looking things. You've probably seen out there the focus hashtag deliver. And one of the things that, let's see, with the chicken and pig cartoons, I know one of the things that went out earlier last week was the amplifier is going to 11. I actually have a comic from way back with Spinal Tap. So I figured I'd put that in there for you, Braz. What we're also going to be doing tonight is and I put a link in the chat, and I'll put another link in there to go ahead and download. Let's see here if it works here. Go to agilerichmond_2021.mvizdos.com. And what that will bring up is, let's see. Maybe I'll just click it and see. So this is real time, right? In here, you've got a link for a free worksheet. And this worksheet is something you can either download and print out, or go ahead and you can do file copy and make an electronic copy for yourself along the way. This, if we were in person, is something that I would hand out. And as a presenter, it's always good to leave the attendees with something that you can walk away with. Typically, I also print these on like cardstock kind of paper. And again, it's leaving people, the attendees, with some key takeaways over the session that you're presenting. So also notice I do have a landing page that has all the information in one place. This is good also if you're thinking about submitting for talks, so you can have a history of like the talks you've done. And some people are afraid of like sharing information. I think by now most people here, if you haven't seen, I give away almost everything I do. There's nothing wrong with giving it away. None of the stuff that I'm talking about tonight is rocket science. It's a point of view. There's nothing in here that's proprietary. I actually encourage you, go ahead and if you want to steal any of this, use it. Okay. Now you can put attribution or not, whatever, but make sure that you make stuff available and open to the community. I get a lot of flack for it actually from some of the other presenters and professional speakers. What I have found out though is when you give it away, it comes back in spades. So keep doing that. You can connect with me on social media. I'm on Twitter, YouTube, and LinkedIn are my three main areas to connect with. And for tonight, what we're going to be doing is we're not going to be learning about Scrum tonight. It's about, that's outside the scope of this session. However, Tuesday night, you can go to scrumrva.org and there will probably be a full / waiting list for this presentation. This is going to be a talk that I've given for many years, and I've got some new content with the Scrum Guide 2020 update. So again, lots of sharing of free information. Tonight we're going to talk about how do you get started with Scrum, assuming that you know some of the basics. And then we're going to talk about some of the 11 tips for success, things to watch out for, and how do you keep it going, and talk about what do we do next with all this information. What I also like to do is leave any kind of presentation like this with, like, what's one thing you can walk away with from what you've learned. I want to make sure the time that we spend together is valuable for you. And if it's not, right, you can vote with your feet, right? Just, you know how to say leave if you need to. From 2006 to 2011, we published close to 100 of these comic strips and cartoons with chickens and pigs. So they're all out at implementingscrum.com if you're interested in any of those. Again, those are pretty much all public domain now, and people have been using them. And whatever you need to do, you can watch a Scrum overview on my YouTube channel. I also have recorded the Scrum Guide for the last close to 10 years. The 2020 version of the Scrum Guide and a new interactive Scrum Guide is actually up. And what I really, this is how do I move this thing? Let me move that out of the way. The interactive guide is pretty cool. This interactive guide, you know, the Scrum Guide from Ken and Jeff, all of this is hyperlinked. You've got all of this is available online. So let's say, you know, you want to go, oh, Scrum team, how do I learn about the Scrum team, right? It'll bring you to that section of the document. Also, each of the sections has a link to the audio clip, and you can get a full audio version of the Scrum Guide just by going to that location. The new Scrum Guide is just under half an hour, and it's pretty good to have around to listen to if you need it. So again, I just want to share these free resources with you. You can also always get training with me. There's other great trainers in town too. I know Mark Palmer is a CST, and there's lots of different trainers around. If you're looking for training, contact me. I've worked with many of the trainers in the industry. I've trained a lot of the trainers, like, to become trainers. So if you're looking for something, let me know. You don't have to get the training with me, of course. And then I do a Agile Mentoring online group with Ron Jeffries. He's one of the founders or the signatories of the Agile Manifesto. And for those of you who have never seen or heard from Ron Jeffries, he's pretty vocal about all the things he does. And then I've got an Implementing Scrum email that goes out once a week, usually on Saturday mornings. If you go there, guess what? Subscribe. And what'll happen is you'll get a free video and a Scrum Guide cheat sheet. So, and really fun emails on Saturday mornings or whenever you read them. So what we're going to do now is talk about how do we get started with using Scrum. First off, you need to pick a project, product, or service. And this might be counterintuitive, but pick one that is in the red. Everybody familiar with in the red projects, right? They're either way over budget, way over time, or just, one of the things to think about is, should you kill those projects in red? That could be a tough political move to make. But if you pick one that's red and you're interested in starting with something like Scrum, it's a great opportunity to do it, because guess what? It's already a failed project. Finally, also, you want to get support from above. I talk a lot about that forming, storming, norming, and performing that happens with the Tuckman model. And as you get into making any kind of change, and Scrum is a pretty big change because you're changing a lot of the way you do work and interactions with each other. You got to have some fire cover from above, because when things go bad, and they will, remember, forming, storming, it's going to hit the fan. If you don't have somebody above to help clear some of the impediments that are coming up, this is not a good idea to do. Okay? Any engagement that I go into, I require somebody at the senior level to make sure that they have the political fire cover to do this. I'm working with one client right now that they talked really good about it. And then when it started hitting the fan, they were like, why is this such an incredible shit show? That's a word that they used. And I'm like, because it is, right? And this is what we're trying to get through and learn as a team. So I know it's a kind of a strong word to use, but it's real life and it's happening. And then you want to make sure you have an identified Scrum team. Prior to 2020, they were called roles. Now they're called accountabilities. And the three accountabilities are the Scrum Master, the product owner, and it used to be development team members. Now they're just developers. And remember, the developers are not just, I call them the Cheeto Puff kids, the people that, write software. It's anybody that's on the team that's helping to deliver an increment to meet the product goal. And you really, really need to have a dedicated team, so you're not working on like having one person working on 4 or 5 different projects. I'm pretty sure I'm not the only one in this room that has been in that situation before. It's pretty painful. So here's what I hear a lot. But Mike, we can't do that. My recommendation is, if you can't do those 3 simple things, don't start using Scrum. You will wind up failing. Okay. And remember, Scrum is a precursor to a lot of maybe other techniques of scaling. If you can't do the scaling, if you can't do Scrum at the team level, scaling some kind of agile technique is not going to work. And I know there's proponents that say, there's different ways to do that. But what I want you to make sure is go ahead and download that worksheet. And what we're going to do is, when you're in the worksheet, you're going to talk about I'm going to give you 10 minutes. Talk about this getting started with Scrum. So pick a project, get support from above, and identify the accountabilities. And what I want you to do is talk about in your breakout rooms, what gets in the way of this happening, and share some stories with each other around how you have been able to maybe get around some of the things that get in the way of starting a successful Scrum implementation. So that's what I want you to do, is what can make this possible. I want you to go ahead and I'm going to break you into breakout rooms now. And then let's see, I'm going to give you about 10 minutes for doing this. Let's see here, if it's going to let me here. 2, 3. We'll do 4 breakout rooms, about 5 to 6 people per room. So through the magic of Zoom, one of the things, if you're not familiar with this, you're going to get prompted that says go into the breakout room and go ahead and talk about what can make this possible. Just those 3 simple things. And we'll get back together and debrief and discuss this in about 10 minutes. Let's see, open. Let's see if it works. We're also going to pause the recording of this so that people at home watching this later don't have to watch just a blank screen for 10 minutes. Everybody good?
Time to perform, I
Woohoo.
guess.
Welcome back.
We've been summoned.
Okay, we did come back. We get a point for that.
Yeah.
There's no choice in the matter, Mike.
Thanks.
You're welcome. So let's talk about what did you discuss in some of the rooms? What can we do to help this, or what's missing? Remember, you're all on mute, so if you want to speak up, go for it.
We had one challenge that was common amongst two people, in that sometimes the project service or product is sort of handed down from on high, and so influencing the right one to pick was always a bit of a challenge.
And how do they wind up picking them?
Because it comes from on high, I don't think we got the impression that we understood how that happened. So there's sort of the sense, in my particular case, it was probably layers of management in the person who was in the room. We didn't go into exactly how they arrived.
Good point. Yeah, and that portfolio management level thing is almost in Scrum untalked about, and magic happens here. And as many people have learned, the magic sometimes does not happen. Anybody else?
We discussed support from leadership. And without that, I think we all unanimously agree, without that, it's just going to fail.
And what happens when you have to give the bad news, or you have an impediment that you need that support from above? Is it easy to have difficult conversations around that, or does anybody have some hints around that?
Awkward at best. I've had leaders, so we had a project where one group was in Atlanta and they were not agile. They weren't following anything, just outside of their own silo. And we were agile and they were a dependency. We needed their assistance in order to get the system up. And our boss, we're agile, so you guys are hammered every day. Why haven't you removed this impediment? And there was nothing we could do. We ran up as far as we could up the ladder and just got slapped back down. And so he kept asking us for dates, and we've got no dates. We can't make any plans because we have zero coordination with that group. And it probably took 8 months, but when they did get on board, it improved 1,000-fold.
And it did take some leadership to be able to undo that.
100%, yes. They set that whole org up in teams. We went through some sort of PI planning where we could organize and group and plan sprints and when they would be able to deliver to us versus other teams. Yeah, it was a lot better.
Excellent.
Is
anybody working? Oh, go ahead.
Is that David Michael's dog I hear? This is Mike Anderson.
Yeah, she's bored.
I've heard the sound before on Zoom. So, Michael, I was going to say that our breakout room was interesting because we had two people who may want to speak, come from a government industry perspective, and I'm in a large corporation in the private sector, and we had two different kind of challenges. One around getting the project picked and getting support. And then my project is my problem centered around how do we get the teams to do agile. We got plenty of support, but we don't always do agile. We do a lot of waterfall disguised as agile.
Mm-hmm.
Two different kind of takes on life in the big city. And how do you get those teams to, understand it, follow the ceremonies, engage in the value of Agile. So you have to kind of maybe break it into smaller projects and see success. That's what we try to do, I think.
Does anybody have any input on that from the room also? How many people have tried to run a project without that support from above? Does everybody have that scar?
Yes.
Yeah.
What about that picking a project that's in red? It kind of goes counterintuitive to a lot of things that are taught, especially with like, traditional project management. Has anybody tried that technique? And Braz, what happened?
I tried it twice, Mike. Once it didn't work at all. It went down in flames. It went down in flames fast. There wasn't the support to try anything new because you don't understand how critical this is. We don't have the luxury of trying something else. That was a recognition that the project's in red, but we don't have the support from above.
Mm-hmm.
In the other case, if the project is in red, and we have the support from above to, because this is in red, and because it's so important, do what you need to do. And that was the deck clearing luxury to say, we're going to try this Agile stuff. We're going to do this Scrum team stuff. And when we say we need something, when we say we have an impediment, help us fix it. And then once that project went from red to green, we can say, great, what did we learn? And how do we stop doing it? Instead of just being something in red, how do we make this the status quo so it's not such a fire drill?
Mm-hmm. And that institutional knowledge, the organizational knowledge, the experience is highly beneficial, especially when you're trying to roll it out across maybe multiple teams within an organization. What's different about doing an implementation of like Agile or Scrum with a project in red versus one that the powers that be say, we are now all doing Scrum, safe, whatever. We are agile. How's that look?
I'd imagine there would be no time for training, no time for sort of gently nudging people into different behaviors and different roles. It's pretty much, we're going to do a smaller increment of something or other, and that's all we're going to do this week.
Yeah. And it, especially with Scrum versus Kanban, right? You are intentionally making changes in the roles and responsibilities and the makeup of the team, right? With Kanban, and that group will spend a lot of time with that, is limiting work in process is huge. But if you're just limiting work in process and not doing anything about it, whether it's in Scrum or Kanban or anything else, right, it just starts looking like micromanagement. So again, making sure that you're staying true to any of these different Agile techniques is super important. And we're going to go over some of the tips, especially now with Scrum. Did anybody have any? Let's see here. Gil, you want to ask your question out loud?
Yeah, just very quickly, depending. If you're going to mention any differences, you're picking the projects, the ones that are in red. Can you say what are the differences that you've seen? A project that's in red, but okay, it's in red, but it's not as important to the company, versus a project that's in red, but it's very, very important to the company. I've seen which one to pick.
Do the one that's very, very important to the company. The red projects that show up on somebody's dashboard, they need to be killed, right? If it's not providing value, this might be an incredible opportunity to actually start using something like Scrum to justify shutting it down. Right? There is value in shutting down projects, and again, that kind of goes counterintuitive to a lot of what we talk about. but what Braz talked about, what I and I'm sure others here have experienced is when you take a project you're basically, there's no win, continue it however you're doing. And by applying some of the techniques that we're going to be talking about, you'll see success. And success could be actually shutting the project down. Has anybody else shut a project down and walked away actually feeling good about it? Braz is like, boom.
Yeah, and Mike, I go back frequently to the most important word in any product owner's vocabulary. It's no.
No, no, no.
Got my button here. I love this one.
No.
Oh wait, now I have to go through it because there's a couple of good ones here.
No. N-O.
I think the next one.
No.
Wait, one more.
No.
I like that. The no. This is why is no so important, Braz?
I think the idea that I have a limited amount of time, I've got a short little time box, and I need to focus. And if I say yes to 87 things, I'm going to get 87 things not done. If I say yes to one, the likelihood I'm going to get that one thing done and I can focus and actually deliver it actually goes up exponentially. When there's a bunch of stuff that I could be doing this other thing here that ought to be killed off, or could do this other thing that's really the most important thing we should be working on, why would I pick that if I can increase the likelihood we'll get this other thing done? No, let's do the most important thing and get it done.
Yeah, some of the toughest conversations that I have with leadership is, put on your big kid pants and prioritize. And that could be a career limiting move for some people in here. So again, a recommendation. Ooh, here's a good one. For free. If you need me to have that conversation with your leadership, there's nothing that I can do to, get kicked out because, you're not paying me to do it. I'll have that conversation with leadership teams. And I'll put them in contact with other people that really get that. Mike Anderson, you put a good comment in there that we need to hand out for all those POs. I used to, when I did the PO classes in person, I used to actually hand out those no buttons. You can get them on Amazon or, out there. When Michael's was a thing, it was, I would go in there and buy a bunch of them. Dave, you want to ask your question?
Yeah. It was just a big crash in the other room. I'm scared what my dog just did.
Okay. Look over here.
So for me, when I first got into this, I looked at the values and the principles, and I thought they resonated with me, right? If we follow these beliefs, then everything should follow from that. Focus on delivering something of value to the customer on a regular basis, in a sustainable fashion, right? But I rarely hear anybody talking about those principles, the values a little more. And if we're not talking about those, then Scrum is just a set of procedures, and the procedures aren't going to stick or mean anything if nobody believes all of the beliefs that are behind the work. Have you seen places that actually talk about the principles and values a lot?
Absolutely. And the ones that keep those in mind, and within Scrum, bringing them up in retrospectives is a great opportunity to remind people about either the 12 Agile principles or even the 4 values or the 5 Scrum values. The teams that get it and understand this is more of a change in mindset than just, check the box things, have a much higher success rate than just doing the check the box thing.
And Dave, to your question with respect to have we seen places like that? So if you're familiar with the work of Ian Maple from Intuit, he actually is in Workday, but they have spent quite a bit of time and effort on remodeling this, the Agile Manifesto principles and guidelines, essentially the 12 guidelines, to a set of values that essentially drove the way that Intuit kind of modeled and created their agile model. He's got a bunch of videos online. Highly recommend folks actually look at that as an example of an organization that took the meaning of agility essentially and turned it into something actionable for them.
Yeah, to where they can continue implementing changes throughout the tax season, right? And they used to, be pretty frozen hard during tax season. Now it's, thousands of changes go in from beginning to end of tax season. If you could put the link or the person's name in the chat for everybody, that would be awesome.
I will do.
Thank you, sir. All right, so one thing to remember, there are no silver bullets in Scrum. Just following this is not going to always guarantee success. I know Michael Spade is on the call too, and he has got a really awesome book out now that I know he worked a very, very long time on that will probably help a lot of teams here. So we're going to dive in now into the 11 tips for success. So what we're assuming is we've got the leadership, we've got the accountabilities, and we've got a project that's important. And now what do we do? So we talked about this a little, is instead of just getting projects handed from up above, this concept of the Pareto principle, the 80-20 rule, is this conversation that I have with mostly senior leadership around, right? Put on your big kid pants and prioritize. Can somebody talk about how you've seen the Pareto principle, the 80-20 rule, as applied to maybe portfolio management or picking your high value projects? What does that look like in the real world? What is a high value project? What does that look like in your organization or in some organizations? Risk.
Depends what it is. It's your most popular product, your biggest moneymaker, your most popular feature, something of that nature.
And every organization measures that differently. So one of the things I don't want to say is, just take your high revenue project. You could have a high revenue project that's also high cost. What's that going to give you, right? Make sure that you are focusing on the most important projects. And then within the projects, make sure that your product backlog is constantly looking at the Pareto principle to help prioritize or order the product backlog. This product owner role within Scrum is super important, and that person needs to be an incredible storyteller, and that person needs to be able to really communicate, why are we doing this? Talk about product owners having to be, we talk about AKA, they have to be available, knowledge, and have the authority. Mostly have the authority to say no, right? What happens if you have a product owner that's either checked out or can't really communicate why you're doing this? Has anybody had a product owner like that before?
Oh,
or been a product owner?
Too many. There is a there is a cascade of delays essentially in decision making that is created. There is the classic scenario where the team, in the absence of someone to basically answer questions, just goes and builds. And then they get to the demo, if there is one, or to the customer in the worst case, and realize that what they built is not fit for purpose. And then there is the fun blame game scenario and kind of like, go back and fix and now you have to maintain what you build that is not working and all this kind of fun stuff. So it's crucial actually to have somebody to answer the questions of the team, actually, more than like in a good part. I've seen that that's kind of a critical part, to be there when they need them.
Mm-hmm. So the availability is important. And again, that differs from team to team, and it's one of those team norms that you've got to work out together as a team. Scrum is pretty silent on the creation of the product backlog and the product goal, right? It's miracle happens here. What are some key things that a product owner needs to be able to bring to the table for the team? Like, let's maybe talk about design thinking concepts. What other concepts does the product owner, tools does a product owner need to bring to the table?
I mean, they have to be able to clarify from the customer's perspective why the team is doing whatever they're doing.
Mm-hmm.
Translate between customer speak and technical speak sometimes. Different languages, different different constituents and whole thing, for lack of better words. That's one thing they have to bring in, be able to do that.
Yep.
You talked about them. Sorry, go ahead.
Context is critical. It's the bigger picture. You said storyteller, so we don't want a tunnel vision, because we need the team to, even though they may focus on building a bike, they maybe need to know the story of why are we building a bike and not a car or a wagon.
Exactly.
I think building on that storytelling, if they don't know how to tell a story, and there's an art to it, if they can't explain what somebody who's trying to get some problem solved and your product's going to solve that problem for them, what their world looks like to them, what's around them, what constraints are they working within, all those things that if you were watching a movie and all you saw was someone walk onto a blank screen, say something, then walk off, you wouldn't know about it. It would be a very interesting movie. But to have all that sort of rich detail and to give depth to the character and give a sense of urgency to the journey that they're about to go on, of which your product is somewhere along that line, that would be pretty powerful. I don't often see that.
Absolutely. And Guy, you want to maybe talk about the concepts of like improv and the yes and stance?
Yeah. So I do a little bit of improv on the side, and one exercise I did with my team around getting them to understand how to collaborate on ideas. So we don't really have a product owner. The thing we're developing is a framework for project managers to do a little bit better on managing their projects. So one of the exercises we did was to say, come up with a crazy product like silver colored tomatoes that work well on the moon, something ridiculous like that. And the idea was to get people to bring out ideas and for other people to say yes and build upon those ideas. So it didn't matter so much about whether the idea is good or bad. It was about building a rich and deep idea as to what that product was, how it could be used, who would use it, all the things that go around the product, so that people could bring a mental image to bear when they're saying, okay, great, I've got that picture. I understand what a silver tomato on the moon's got to do. And it can influence them as they're doing their development work, because they've got a strong set of metaphors that they've structured around what they're trying to do. So it's more than just a requirement or a story that's written in very textual format. It's having that depth and breadth to the understanding, so they can it helps them as they carry that into their work. And it also provides a sort of a language for conversations around the product. So what about the moon? What's important there? Is gravity important? Yeah, okay, great. Now let's get to the specifics of gravity on the moon. But they're able to have that conversation because they have a common language and a common understanding of the world that they're building around their particular product.
Hey guys, submit a talk for this this May event coming up. I will be there.
Menovate, Virginia, Mike. Menovate, Virginia. Work on that.
Yeah,
There you
yeah,
go.
guy. Yeah, guy, please make a talk. I'm signing up now.
Okay, so someone in the what at the end by the end of this thing, someone put in the chat window what I'm supposed to be talking about because I just blabbed.
Yeah, it's all about improv. You got this.
Improv with Guy.
That's right.
Yeah.
But has silver tomatoes on the moon, so such a great product. Improv.
The next thing besides a product owner that really can tell a compelling story and understands the why is make sure that you have a dedicated Scrum team. And this is very hard to do. And one of the reasons why a lot of people don't do Scrum is we're going to take what's called a cross-functional team. So let's say on a software development project, it may be a developer, a tester, an analyst, a DBA, and put them on the same team. When you put that cross-functional team together, focused on the why of what you're doing, your throughput goes through the roof. I'm pretty sure I'm not the only one here that's been on non-dedicated Scrum teams. What does non-dedicated Scrum teams look like? And why should you avoid those? Anybody want to share some experiences?
Well, if you're not dedicated, then you're all of a sudden, as soon as you try and plan something, and the next thing you know, they're pulled off and you're not getting that done for a week or two, or a month or whatever. You can't rely on them. They're hating life because they're getting pulled in 6 directions. They can't commit to anything. It's always something pulling them in another direction. It gets frustrating. It kills trust because you can't depend on them to do what they want to do. They feel bad because they can't do what they intended to do.
Yeah.
It's kind of interesting with when a team's not dedicated, just agreeing with everything that you just said. I've also found when the team's not dedicated and it falls apart, which inevitably does, that leadership or anybody who's anti-agile, anti-scrum will use a see it doesn't work. It's just harder to be in that environment.
And that gets compounded when you do things at scale. Had this wonderful experience. It's another scar of doing a quarterly planning exercise, safe style, essentially with multiple teams, and you have to build this on expectations that the teams are going to do something, that they're going to perform what they actually commit to. In the absence of having dedicated team, it took a few days for the plan basically to fall apart, and it's just devastating for everyone essentially.
I put a link in there for Ron Jeffries has a really good write-up. I bought a URL and points to his writing. It's called darkscrum.com, and it's a rather long read, but it really talks a lot about almost the anti-patterns of what we're talking about in here. So he talks about the problems, but he also gives some really in-depth good recommendations on how to break through some of the things that we're talking about tonight.
Hey, Michael.
Yes, sir.
Just a really short question. I am wondering if what I sometimes think is a great thing, which is a dedicated team that is together and stays together, is a benefit and a blessing. But what if you work in an organization where those teams also have a consistent team leader, tech leader? One of them is a people manager inside the team of engineers. To me, that is sometimes a good thing, and sometimes it is a chilling effect because the teams get used to Mike's the team lead. He knows all the answers. We'll just wait for Mike to give us the how we're going to design this project. It'd be hard. It sometimes seems like that's kind of a dark space. It's a great team because they stay together, but it falls into those same habits of let's let Mike tell us the answer because he's the team leader among the engineers. Any thoughts on that?
Absolutely. As a coach, when I'm working with teams on that, I will ask that expert really to switch into mentoring mode. And while it looks almost like it's slowing things down, it helps build up the rest of your team process or your team, I guess, abilities. If there's not a lot of trust in the environment, none of this stuff is going to work either, right? It's all predicated on
Right.
transparency, inspection, and adaptation. And
Right.
when you don't have those and you have zero trust, again, you get into that dark scrum area. And, if it's, I got to look better than you, this is going to be a really hard thing to do.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
Can I interrupt? I'm sorry. Let me just follow up. I'm not sure I totally understood that, but just recently, management is suggesting that we rotate Scrum Masters to give, well, I won't go into the reasons, but is this sort of along the same lines? Because we were discussing and saying, well, I thought teams should stay together, blah, blah, blah. So what do you?
The good thing about that possibly is if it's a scrum master rotating that accountability within the same team, that gives some really awesome perspective for the team members. If it's scrum masters switching teams every sprint,
yep,
what'll happen is you never get out of that forming and storming mode, because remember, whenever you switch team members, you go back to that forming mode. I haven't seen it work effectively when you're switching scrum masters between sprints. Has anybody seen that happen effectively, and maybe have any hints to this?
And not, I would agree, not every sprint, but like, I don't know, 6 months or a year, rotate them.
Absolutely. And so ask the teams in the retrospectives. One of the things that I found pretty a low bar for the switching around is actually having different scrum masters go in and facilitate other teams' retrospectives, because you can truly keep a neutral stance when you're facilitating maybe a tough retrospective.
Thank you.
That help?
Yeah, thanks.
And with Scrum, you've got to create an initial product backlog. This does not mean have a sprint zero. And we're going to spend the next 2 to 4 weeks coming up with an awesome product backlog. I worked with one team in the past that had a sprint 0.29. Think about that for a moment, right? They spent almost a year trying to come up with perfect requirements and the perfect backlog. And the idea around a product backlog is it is emergent. It will change. And the product backlog is never going to be empty. Okay. This is good because, right, this is job security too. You do not have to do everything in a product backlog. So when you're creating product backlogs, whether they're stories or whatever you want to call them, get enough to get started. And remember, if you have a product owner who really understands why and the dedicated Scrum team that can work together, you're going through that forming and storming together, you'll get better at doing the work. And then once you have the product backlog, order it. Right? Come up with, here's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, whatever. You're wrong at the beginning. It's okay. Just get started. What you don't want is to have a product backlog that has all high priority, huge, epic stories. Guess what? You'll never get started. And then So you're creating your initial product backlog, you're ordering it quickly, and then you're planning your first sprint. You're creating that sprint goal that aligns to the product goal so that you can create increments of the product that deliver value to your customers. Again, you're let's say when Scrum was first kind of put out there as a pattern or a framework, you had to like lock and load your sprint and make sure all of your 4 weeks was planned out. Now, you know what? Get started. And you can always pull high priority items off of the product backlog. Okay. Don't worry about having the perfect sprint backlog to get started. Again, those rarely exist. For people that have been like doing this Scrum thing for a while, let's see, we create a product backlog, we order it, and then we plan it. What did we skip between 5 and 6? Estimating. This estimating thing is a rabbit hole that will you can just go down in and get lost in forever. My recommendation, and the work that I do with real world teams even today, is don't worry about estimating it. Your estimates are wrong. Start delivering instead. An amazing thing happens when you start delivering what you say you're going to deliver. The pressure goes down for, well, give me your accurate estimates. They're estimates, they're guesses. Okay, they're not promises. And there's so many different techniques out there to come up with great estimates. Has anybody had an awesome experience creating estimates that you just totally nailed?
It was the one where I said, don't bother.
Ah, yes, kill the project, right?
No, it was I started out with showing a team. I plotted how long their stories took against the story points that they were using and said, do you see any correlation? No, we don't. Okay, so we're not going to spend too much time on those. And it's a very powerful visualization to show them, particularly if they're just wound up on, if it's a 2.5 story or a 2.75 type of story deal.
One of the things is popping up in the Tia. Do you want to talk about what is your question around metrics?
Well, if you're not sizing, then how are you doing your burn up or burn down charts, or how are you seeing if you're, going to do some type of long-term metrics or short-term metrics, or velocity?
If I had velocity, what would it do for me?
I know it would as far as your personal team, you would know how much work you could take on if one team member left, or if you got 2 more team member or another team member. It could help you do some guessing, but it would help if you wanted, it's more for the business, they'd want to know.
So it's the important part is the forecasting piece then for you.
Yeah, forecasting. Yeah.
Okay.
And the conversations.
Yeah. So to get more conversations in, what I've switched to doing is saying, okay, so you got a big thingy that you want to do. What could we do to make that thing small enough so it was about the same size? And the team sort of said, yeah, that's our sweet spot size. So spending the time splitting the work and therefore having more conversations about how and where they split that work to make it smaller things. Once you've got them about the same size, you really don't need to estimate because you can do it all by counts.
Mm-hmm.
Right, using your t-shirt sizing.
No, not even. Well, I just say, what's your favorite t-shirt size?
Whatever works for you. You could call it whatever you want to call it, but I see what you're getting at. But it's usually, so because people want some type of something. Eventually, they're going to want a chart or something.
So here's what your end users and customers want: working product. Remember that, right? Don't get too wrapped around the axle about let's standardized story points across our organization.
Yeah,
Right?
I
That
know
is
you can't do that. I know you can't do that because you can't do that at all.
right. Shouldn't. Dave, what about the question about sprint goal?
So if you, my take on a sprint goal is you're talking about delivering something very specific that at the end of this 2 weeks, the team is saying, we're going to deliver this, right? In a good world, it's something that the business can look, touch, play with, and provide feedback on. But if what you're actually doing is you've got, let's say, a team of 5, and 3 of them are working on separate pieces of work, perhaps even separate applications, and it's not a slice of functionality that's going to be delivered. It's going to be creating schema in a database. It's going to be completing 2 production support issues. What are you doing for a sprint goal? Because, I mean, you could say we're going to complete this one story, but you've already said when you commit to the sprint, you're going to complete all the stories you bring in. So how is that any different than what you've already committed to? How would you use a sprint goal if that's the way you're doing work? Or does
Probably wouldn't be using a sprint goal. Probably be really using Kanban and pulling in work and limiting work in process, right? If it's just continuous flow. Remember, one of the main focuses of Scrum is to deliver value to the customer at the end of the sprint. And that changes, like a lot of what we're talking about changes the makeup and the way you actually deliver work. It's no longer, let's do analysis, design, code, test, deploy, right? We're not going to have separate sprints for that. We're going to have one sprint that does that all together, which means you're going to have to get up to speed on agile engineering practices like test-driven development or extreme programming or pair programming. You can put agile in front of any kind of old legacy kind of work, and there's so much information out there now on, right, how do you do that in an agile manner? You really are trying to deliver against a sprint goal, and the sprint goal really shouldn't be BAU, right? Business as usual or keep the lights on. If you're doing that kind of work, you know what? You don't need to be doing it in Scrum. Use Kanban, pull in the work, and identify what are your work in process limits and be really strict to those, right? Scrum is not the answer for everything. It doesn't have to be for every project. Once you get started, the important thing, there's an event in there called the Daily Scrum or the Daily Stand-Up. Notice there's a keyword in there, daily. This is 15-minute or less meeting where the team coordinates to make sure that they're delivering against both the sprint goal and the product goal. There's nothing now in Scrum that says you have to ask the 3 questions, right? What went well, or what did you do yesterday? What are you going to do today? What's in your way, right? Those questions are now gone. The main reason for having that is actually to eliminate other meetings throughout the day. Okay. And this is where you can make adjustments to the work you're doing in a sprint, pull in more product backlog items into the sprint, or help address impediments that come up. And then don't forget, do the work. Oh yeah. It's not all about the process or the framework or making sure that we're having the perfect meetings. Do the work, deliver. I read a book, the Checklist Manifesto. Has anybody read that one? And it talks about like having checklists, like do the work. And one of the great things in there was airline pilots. Any airline pilots in here? They have checklists of things to do. And in the 70s and 80s, planes were crashing. And one of the things that's at the top of every checklist now is number 1, fly the plane. Seems super obvious, but a lot of the reasons for plane crashes was they got so into their checklists, they forgot to do the work of keeping the plane flying. I've worked with multiple teams that have totally forgotten about delivering to the product, to the customers, and gone down this rabbit hole of let's make sure we're doing a perfect process that's perfectly story pointed out and delivering nothing at the end of the day. Please don't forget to deliver. And your sprint review is not a presentation. Okay, this should not be a PowerPoint presentation, and it should not be a PowerPoint presentation that you go and then also say, here's our sprint plan for the next iteration. Okay, the main reason for having a sprint review is to get feedback from your stakeholders, your customers, your end users. A good sprint review will result in new ideas coming up, and you'll have a revised product backlog. Again, this is why you don't have to worry about having that perfect product backlog. When you're delivering to a sprint goal and deliver value each iteration, your product backlog will continue to change. Okay, that's a good sign of a high-functioning Scrum team. And finally, make sure that you have retrospectives. Almost all the teams that I've worked with that have failed doing Scrum gave up doing retrospectives pretty early on. We don't have time for that, Mike. Retrospectives are a waste of time. Retrospectives are one of the most important events within Scrum for the team to figure out how do we get better working together as a team. In the 2017 version of the Scrum Guide, it said, take one of the items from the retrospective and put it as a high priority item in the sprint backlog for the next sprint. Now it's suggested that maybe you take one of those items and put it in the sprint backlog if you want. The idea around the retrospective, though, is you want to get rid of the what went well, what didn't go so well, what can we improve? Because if you do that 8 or 9 sprints, you have a list of like 80 things that you suck at, nothing's getting fixed, and what changes. Esther Derby and Diana Larson is still my go-to book for agile retrospectives, making good teams great. There is no reason you should have a retrospective that goes, what went well, what didn't go so well, what can improve. And especially now with the distributed environment we're in, there are so many awesome templates out there for retrospectives that you shouldn't be doing the retrospective in the same format every time. That might be another good talk for somebody in here to grab for, what's that called? Not Innovate, Virginia.
Innovate.
Innovate.
Thank you, Guy.
See, I'm trying to giving this.
Hey, Mike.
Yes.
On the daily Scrum with Start to Coordinate, if folks are interested in moving from sort of like the 3 questions format to getting folks to try something more like that, what are the questions? How does that feel? How do you get that kicked off? Right, or do you just sort of say go coordinate and just sort of stand back and see what happens?
A lot of what I do, and again, this is a personal style, is I stand back and let it hit the wall, because I want the team to figure out, right, how do you do this? In some of the teams that maybe are in that storming mode, I may have to have more direct conversations, even individually outside of the daily Scrum. We've got some things popping up in the retromat.org, easy retro, the holy crap, yeah, retro formats, keep them fresh. And if you're interviewing for a Scrum Master position, be prepared to describe your favorite retro activity. Not tired, not the what went well, what didn't go so well. And I like that, not taking the team to lunch or bowling.
Mark or Mike, that is the worst answer we get when we interview Scrum Masters, I always ask, what's your favorite retro activity? And if they give me the tired, what went well speech, I kind of know I have some suspects if they're a good Scrum Master. And especially if all they do is just say some social activity. Those are not retros.
Oh, absolutely.
Yep.
And number 11, have a Scrum Master, right? The Scrum Master account, the person who's responsible or accountable as the Scrum Master really needs to embody a lot of the servant leadership roles and responsibilities. In the Scrum Guide, the 2020 version, Ken and Jeff dropped the word servant and just called it true leaders. Okay, so the concept of servant leadership was dropped because people were kind of twisting that concept of servant to stand back and don't do anything. So one of the reasons Ken and Jeff changed it from servant leadership to true leaders is to really bring home that, right, as a leader, you're responsible for helping the product owner, helping the development team, the developers, and helping the organization become effective. You've got to really be good at facilitating. This is something that takes a lot of practice. Like even this event this evening, right? There's a lot of different ways to facilitate this. Had we had 100 people in this, it would be a very different conversation, right? We have 20-something people in here tonight. One of the reasons that we're doing kind of a slow roll through this instead of breaking out into smaller rooms is the value in the conversations is what's really important here. It's a game time call that I'm making. And is it wrong? Could be. Again, one of the ways that you learn to become a more effective facilitator is by trying things. What's the failure bow guy? Do you actually do the failure bow, or what do you do when you like mess up?
We do a silly dance. If you're talking about improv, I failed. We do a wave, and everybody claps, and then we move on.
Yep. Yeah. And it's important, right? Having a sense of humor and humility and empathy is super important. So the servant leadership, being effective facilitator, and also your job as a Scrum Master is to build the environment for high performance teams. Okay, you've got to help lead the teams through that forming, storming, norming, and performing. Right? To get to a high performing team, you just can't just say, woo, everybody went to Scrum training or everybody read a book. Woohoo! How many people here have been on high performing teams? And what's that like? Because not everybody's been on a high performing team before.
I mean, I don't tend to be on them very often, but when I have seen them, there's a sense of folks who may have heard the term from Csikszentmihalyi Mihaly, his book called The Flow or Flow, that sort of state that an individual gets in where you're sort of the thing that you're doing is not too challenging, it's not too easy, but you're just sucked into it. You're sort of unaware of time. And when I see a high performing team, they have that same sense, but at more of a team level. They're just bouncing back and forward. There's a sense of equality and equity across what they're doing, but they're sort of in that state of flow. They're not really aware of time. They're just plowing through what they're doing. And that for me was sort of a real indicator, but I don't see it very often.
Yeah, same here. That I was about to say very similar. That like they're in the individual being in the zone, but the team is in the zone. And even if you feel tired at the end of the day, but it's like you feel like you've accomplished something, and then the whole team feels it with you. It's like, wow, at the end of the week, I need a sprint. You've done a lot, but it's like you're in the zone. That's exactly the feeling that just comes to play for me.
Hey, Michael Spade, the quiet guy in the back, putting lots of comments in. Can you come off a mute maybe, and if possible, talk about the comment that you just put in there about servant leadership?
Sure. Ken and Jeff pulling back from servant leadership makes sense to me because I teach a lot about leadership development, and a lot of people I think know that people go through stages of developing as a leader or as a person, and it has to do with the complexity of the way you see the world and the thinking you do, and the level that it takes of inner complexity to be a real servant leader is actually much higher than pretty much anybody gets to. Most people are 2 levels below where you can really manifest being a servant leader. So it was a great aspiration. I mean, I think it does good from the point of view of conveying a message and getting people to try something different. But to your point, walking away is not being a servant leader. I mean, servant leaders are just as tough and confrontational as anybody, but they do it clearly in service of the team, not in service of their own ego in some sense. And that's just a high bar.
And something that Michael and I have worked together for a long time, on and off on projects. Gosh, it's probably been 15 years plus now, right? And
Yes.
That's one of the things that I continue to learn from you, Michael. So thank you. Every time I think I got it, I know I don't. Boom. I got this is not really I got this.
That's why I came out in the snow and the ice, Mike, to see you.
Yeah, all the way on Zoom, right?
Right.
Thank you so much for being here.
Nice talk. Yeah, nice. You're the Lao Tzu of I've determined of agile coaches.
What does that mean?
Well, Lao Tzu, who wrote the Tao Te Ching, the famous Chinese book of wisdom, said, I'll massacre the thing, but a good leader, people say, what a great leader that person is. A great leader, people say, we did it ourselves.
Yeah. And having somebody that has your back as a mentor or a coach is super important, right? Michael, you have yours, I have mine. Lisa Adkins and I, she is doing a podcast series, and one of the podcasts coming up is going to be a discussion between her and I about coaching and mentorship, and like our journey of being
cool.
mentor and coach to each other.
It
was a super impactful discussion, and if you have not read Lisa's book, LYSSA Adkins, she also has a new audiobook version too of coaching agile teams. And Michael, what is your book, since you're here, and can maybe plug it?
It's called Agile Transformation: Using the Integral Agile Transformation Framework to Think and Lead Differently, which talks a lot about, not so directly about servant leadership, but it talks a lot about leadership development, how you grow from one stage to another.
Another good talk to submit.
You know what? We were just talking, Lisa, Michael, Hammond, and Kat and I, and we want to come to a Agile Richmond, event in the future, all of us at once. And but when it's like when we can see each other in person. Does anybody, Braz, do you think that's going to happen in this lifetime?
In this lifetime, yes.
This year, no.
For various definitions of the term lifetime.
Right.
How about of a butterfly?
I sure hope so, Michael.
Well, we're the first ones on the list. Okay. That's
Yeah,
fair?
I
I'll
will
be
buy
there.
I will write it down right now with my trusty Sharpie.
Yes. In permanent Sharpie ink, please.
Hey, Brass, this is Charlene. So I'm
Hi,
listening.
Charlene.
Hi, I'm listening, and it sounds like several people saying they want to do a talk for Agile Richmond. Are you getting their names?
Yeah.
I would happily
Braz.
point them to innovatevirginia.com where they can sign up to be in our call for speakers for Minovate Spring 2021, which would be Friday, May 21st.
Okay, everybody, keep that in mind.
Yep, we've been plugging it, Charlene. So what's been different about this version is, again, since we've had a small group, a relatively small group, instead of breaking into the smaller breakout groups, we've had discussions along the way. And one of the things I'd love to know is, what am I missing? I like to keep it at 10 or less, or that 11 number. Is there something in here that I should either delete, or what should I replace in here? I've been doing this talk for many years, and I have replaced a couple of things over time. Any feedback or ideas?
Mike, I have one thing. I disagree with your perspective on retros. just to be contrary, and because I'm really passionate about them. But I would say for a high performing team, sometimes doing a simple what went well, what didn't work retro is totally fine.
Okay.
I think that it really just depends on the, like, I mean, I would say like probably like maybe 2 or 3 times a year, I might do that with one of my teams, because I switch them up so much. Like, it's not that retro is a bad one. It's that it's very basic and it can get really boring. So I feel like if you're switching them up all the time, it's not a bad one to have a really simple one once in a while, and maybe
Absolutely.
like do more of like a bonding experience, because I'll put more into like icebreakers or a bonding experience or a project that we can do that's a fun thing together, and not just the retro. And if they're high performing, if they're already collaborative and having great discussions and raising their risks and impediments and dependencies all through the sprint and not just saving them for retro, then the fact that it's kind of a bland retro isn't actually a problem, because they're going to talk about whatever the problems were anyways. Like, they're still going to have those great discussions. And it really depends on the maturity of the team. Yeah.
Yep. So if I changed it to change up your sprint retros,
I would just say, like, yeah, keep retros interesting and unexpected and fun, so that you're engaging people.
absolutely. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Anybody else?
I might put something in there that emphasizes responding to what you learned during the sprint. I don't know how you put that in there, but there's always a sense of laying down the plan and trying to stick to the plan that I find with teams versus potentially doing things in the middle of the sprint. Like, there was an idea from Capital Kanban from Dan Vacante about if your story seems to be taking too long, split that sucker in the middle of the sprint. Well, that seems pretty controversial, but responding so that some of that stuff which tends to get pushed off, oh, let's talk about that in retrospective, as opposed to, no, can we respond to that information now and still hit the sprint goal?
Absolutely. And one of the things that did also change in the updated Scrum guide is that concept around product backlog refinement happens continuously. So doing that is super important, which means you can, get stories ready for an upcoming sprint, or break something out and put it back into the product backlog.
So one thing I would say is some way of, like, when you see an anti-pattern, so being a good advocate for the team when there's anti-patterns. like I see number 3, like we had a problem with one of my teams where half the team was dedicated on other work and half the team was dedicated on this other thing. And then, so everybody was just very siloed, and then like we could schedule all the collaborative time we wanted to, but they weren't working on the same thing. So it didn't matter. And it took months of going back and forth and being like, hey, leadership, this is a problem. Hey guys, this is still a problem. Like, no, really, can you fix this? Can you fix this now, please? Can you make the decision that's required to fix this problem? And just being a persistent advocate for your teams when you do see an anti-pattern, whatever it is.
Absolutely. Thank you.
I'll add
I would
one more.
like, go ahead.
Go ahead. No, go ahead, Tia.
Oh, I'd like to offer something, when I look at what number is it? When you talk about planning your first sprint to deliver towards a sprint goal, how do you know how much work you're going to bite off, and then you're doing a sprint goal if you're not doing any type of metric or anything like that, or sizing or anything like that. So, if someone's new to Agile, I think they would be confused on how to move on to get to do the work towards the sprint goal and setting the next sprint goal.
Having an effective sprint goal means really having a product owner that gets it and can communicate the why. If it helps to do estimating and creating your plan velocity, do it. Right, the conversations are really what are important. What I have found though, especially when you're in that forming and storming mode, you're wrong on them anyway, right? And starting to deliver things again changes the conversations.
So how do you know how much work? How do they know how much work to do? Do the work. How do they know how much work there?
Yep, when they're first starting, they don't know anyway, even with estimating. Again, maybe it's pulling a couple stories and start working on them. And if you've got time in the rest of the sprint, pull in the next high priority item.
Okay, so you're just saying take a couple stories, get started, and then go from there. And if you finish that before your sprint, then you just continue to add stories. Then next sprint, you'll kind of know how many stories to bite off for your sprint, to include in your sprint.
Absolutely.
Oh, that's what you're saying. Okay.
Braz?
Yeah, I love where you're going with that too. The short version of how I say that is you're going to be wrong.
Yep.
Guaranteed. So I'd rather be wrong really quick and learn than continue to invest time in being slightly less wrong. So.
Absolutely. Oh yeah. Now.
Wrong.
Okay, yeah, I'm just saying, because I've done this time and time again, and if you just throw something out there like, but I was just offering that, but now I get his concept, what he's doing. Just do something, and figure it out from there. So I get what he's saying. Thanks.
Thank you. All right, so we're gonna wrap it up. We got about a minute left, and I want to honor the time boxing for tonight for 8 o'clock. Just remember, right, as a Scrum Master, as anybody involved with a Scrum team, just keep doing the work. Don't forget the basics. And Tuesday night, join us for the Back to the Basics. We're gonna deep dive into the Scrum Guide with the changes and some of the things that, well, we're gonna have a lot of breakouts in there, because there will be it'll be a full deck of people, 100 plus people, guaranteed that there will be some very rich discussions in there. So again, please feel free to download the presentation, the worksheet, focus and deliver. If anybody here wants to talk, you can go to calendar.mvizdos.com. Let's talk, right? And again, if you want to submit a talk for May and you need some assistance, let me know. All right. You can see the important thing is not about having the perfect presentation. It's about engaging people. It's a different style. And I want to thank you all for participating and sticking around tonight. we'll call it done. And if anyone wants to stick around for any final questions, otherwise, if I don't see you Tuesday night, I'll see you at the next Agile Richmond meeting. Thank you.
Thanks, Mike.
Thanks, Mike.
Thanks, Mike.
Thank you so
Thanks,
much,
Mike.
Mike.
And thank you, everybody. This has been great. It's great to have everybody together. And we'll see you in 1 month's time. If you get a chance, go check out our call for speakers at innovatevirginia.com, and we'll see you next month. Good night, everybody.
Good night,
Bye-bye.
everybody.
Good night, all. Bye-bye. Good night.
Now, do you say, get off my lawn?
I leave that for you, Mike.
Hey.
In his recording studio sound booth. Nice, nice rig.
This is totally worth, getting the blue microphone with that
Yeah,
setup
swivel.
they've got.
Yeah.
Huge difference. There's no
What?
creaking involved.
Yeah, right. What microphone is it?
It's the Yeti. So I think it's like the Yeti Procaster, right? It has the boom arm and the mic.
And how much is that?
I think it's like $199.
That's all?
Under. Yep. And just the boom itself is usually like $139 or $149. So
Yeah, I can imagine. Yeah.
And there's probably going to be a wait. If anybody buys it before you set it up, watch some videos on it, because there's some ways you can mess it up.
Is this the second one you bought, Mike? Voice of experience sounds like.
Mm-hmm. So, and Raz and crew, thank you for having me on here tonight.
Thank you for being here, Mike. Really appreciate it.
It's always a fun experience. And Michael, man, I'm glad to see you. I haven't seen you in a while.
I know.
It's been on my calendar for a while, and it just it happened to work out. Sometimes this time just wouldn't work out, but it did tonight. So
Awesome.
nice,
Thank
really
you.
nice to see you.
Yes, thank you.
Great to see you, Michael.
Alrighty.
All right, gentlemen.
Thanks so much.
Later.
Yep. Okay.
Have a great evening.
I'm out.
Happy
Peace.
Thursday.